Civil War is probably one of my favourite films that have come out of the Marvel franchise. This opinion I share with probably a lot of other people. Not only was it a great standalone film, it was also the introduction of Black Panther and Spider-Man. And we all know that Spider-Man is my favourite Marvel character. This film introduced him as a really cool character, and I love the fact that we've still got him to this day. So for those of you who are paying attention, this project has actually been picked by you guys. At the end of the Daily Bugle project, I put out a poll basically saying what you guys wanted to see next, and you guys picked this one. And I can understand why. It's one of the most famous scenes out of Marvel history, but unfortunately that also means that the original set from 2017 has gone up stacks on the aftermarket. So trying to make this a modification thing just isn't happening. I actually think this is going to be more expensive than just buying one of those sets outright, but at least I can save some money in a few areas. Now the scene is quite a fairly long one, so I obviously won't be able to show it all in this video, but if we check out some of the scene that I wanted to pick this mock from, I'll probably be picking this scene here. The one where Giant Man immediately grows and starts destroying almost everything around him. That way we can focus on more of the Avengers and their own stories within the diorama, rather than focusing on the actual airport side of it. Most of this scene happens outside, and a lot of it happens with all the Avengers out on the actual airstrip, so we can maximize getting all these figures and putting them in dynamic poses and making it relevant to where they need to be. Obviously, taking a look at the scene, there's a lot more details that was included back on the original set that we'll need to focus on to make this almost a Master Builders set. Taking a look at the original set, you can see that we've got three main areas to focus on. One being Giant Man, one being the airport tower, and finally the Quinjet. Now these are the three main builds that I think we're going to be doing throughout this process. And to help us match our scene, first thing we're going to tackle is probably Giant Man. First off, I understand why LEGO made him look like this, because obviously budget reasons and everything like that. However, obviously in the film, he's much bigger than this, so I think that's the first priority. I know Ant-Man isn't a very popular character, but Paul Rudd's version of Ant-Man is actually one of my favourite MCU titles, along with the almighty Saint himself, and both of them are really good in this scene. I already have the plans for Giant Man, and yes, he will be brick built, but to give a little more context on just how big I want this guy, he is actually going to be bigger than the buildable Harry Potter figures that we saw earlier this year. So if you guys have those figures, you'll kind of know how big we're making this guy. I think this will be a more accurate representation of how big he is in the actual film. Obviously, looking at the original airport tower, we're probably going to build something very similar, just much bigger and much more substantial, as that will probably be our representation of the airport. There was considerations for a while of building a hangar with the Quinjet inside of it, but weighing up the cost of building a Quinjet, either custom or the one from the original set, added so much to the budget of this set, and that's not including the really big hangar we'd have to make to keep the Quinjet inside of. Maybe this is something we could look into for one day, but this time round we're going to just leave the hangar out of it. This unfortunately means that we're probably not going to have a Quinjet for this final build. However, I have a backup plan. Obviously, in terms of the scene itself, we're going to be mainly focusing on this giant plane that Ant-Man rips the wing off and starts to throw at other people. I think this would be a better direction to put the money into, rather than buying an expensive Quinjet, which is only in the scene for about 5 seconds. This way our minifigures can be way more dynamic, and it'll give me more options and not have to have Black Panther, Black Widow, Bucky, and Captain America so far away. So with this knowledge in mind, I took to drawing. Now here is a time lapse of the model we are hopefully going to make. You can see that it's actually very reminiscent of the original set, and made sure that I stuck to this, as I feel that you can make the airport without having to make the huge building in the background, which was at one point considered, but unfortunately I don't have that kind of money. One thing I really enjoyed about the planning process of this is this drawing was done in conjunction with the members. We normally jump into a Discord call every Friday, and this is where we discuss future video ideas and multi-part projects. The members really do make it possible to do a lot more with these types of projects, that or the people buying from my website, whether it be merch options or just instructions for models that you guys want to make. There are so many benefits you guys get from becoming a member, such as exclusive wallpapers of some of the thumbnails that I do, obviously the Discord call every Friday at 5 PM UK time, exclusive content over on my Discord studio files, and not to mention a behind the scenes special of this very series you're watching right now, taking you behind the scenes of how I make these videos, discussing more of the decision process, and how I make these videos for you guys on YouTube. If that's something that you'd be interested in, press the join button and just take a look at some of the options that are there. Like I say, some of these members actually got to help me design this and watch me start some of the build process on studio, and I got to answer questions with them along the way, and it was super fun. We discussed discussed multiple avenues of how this set could have gone, while in the meantime I discussed what would be possible and what probably wouldn't be possible. There were discussions of putting this entire MOC on a base plate at one point, and we ultimately decided that eventually this wouldn't be a good idea because then we'd have to lower the price of everything, making some things like the tower smaller, and swapping out less expensive pieces on things like the Giant Man MOC to make him less accurate. I also think this set doesn't really need to be on a base plate. The original didn't do one, so I don't think we're going to do one either. I think the beauty of this MOC is going to be one of those things where you can move the things around. Say you want different minifigures in different positions, they're not going to be locked down to certain things, apart from maybe one or two characters that we're going to have flying. This series has been in preparation now for about 2 weeks, so there are a few things that I've bought already for this project that we'll get to in later episodes. I think trying to include as many official LEGO sets as possible will be good for you guys trying to recreate this or trying to do something of your own later on down the line when this series is done and dusted. So if you want to count this series as a MOC series or a mod series, it's up to you. Basically, we're going to be modding and taking things out of other sets to include into this giant MOC. Yeah, it's not as big as the Daily Bugle project, but doing these smaller MOCs are still going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, and especially a lot of money. And don't worry, I've heard you guys crying for an Oscorp tower, so we could definitely think about doing that later on down the line. The airport has so many vehicles and everything else around it that I feel like this will still be a substantial enough build, and being able to tell stories with the minifigures I think is the main thing here. We're only the second week in and it's already been awful. I'm not sure if it's just because we are close to Christmas, or the fact that Royal Mail is just deciding to be very, very slow here in the UK, but I genuinely wasn't sure whether I was going to be able to make this video on time, considering nearly all of my parcels hadn't turned up, and that included some of the minifigures and my mods video parts for my Ghostbusters Ecto 1. That video got delayed and I didn't want this video to be delayed either, and I was also worried because I had spent a lot of money on these parcels. And for some strange reason, a lot of Bricklink sellers from UK to UK don't let you put insurance on there, which is really strange. But I thought, hey, it's only UK to UK, so it'll be 3 to 4 days maximum. This was 2 weeks ago. But here we are, welcome to part 2 of building the ultimate Civil War airport battle. A 6-part series where we take that original set that came out in 2016 and revamp it into something that looks almost like a UCS or Master Builders set. Last week we took a look at the plan for this model, where we could really look in depth on what we're going to be doing in terms of a plan. If you haven't seen that video yet, I highly suggest watching that one before this one, because this one we're going to be getting into the minifigures, and what minifigures we're going to add from the original set, and what modifications we're going to be doing to those minifigures to make them look slightly more accurate. Now, like I say, this was a super long time to go without receiving any sort of parcel from Royal Mail, so only having a few minifigures in my arsenal, I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to get this episode out to you guys. But don't worry, they all turned up in the nick of time. Now, as you know, we are rebuilding the Civil War airport battle, and the minifigures included in that set: Iron Man Mark 46, Captain America, the Winter Soldier, Scarlet Witch, War Machine, Sharon Carter, and Giant Man. Now, we already know that Giant Man is getting his own dedicated part in this series, so we're not going to be talking about him today, but I figured we would start off with the figures that were included in the original set and then talk about ones that we expand with from other Civil War sets. As you know, there's a few more people than just that lot in this set, so let's jump in and talk about our first 2 minifigures, being Iron Man and War Machine. Now, I thought I had this Iron Man in my collection, but it turns out that I didn't. And instead of trying to just wiggle my way through it, same with the War Machine, I decided that I would go on Bricklink and buy the actual figure. Wait, what? How expensive are these guys? Okay, so I should probably give a little bit of clarification. I didn't want to go and custom make all of these figures using other figures. I wanted to start off by getting the actual figures from this set. So I had a decision to make. I could either buy the set that included all of these minifigures and then just buy the rest of them, or I could see if I could wiggle myself a deal from other Bricklink sellers, or find them on other selling websites like Facebook or eBay. So I took to the internet, immediately finding some stuff that was really, really overpriced. But eventually, I managed to get my hands on these guys. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't really get myself a good deal on them, so I figured that I'd have to just bite the bullet and maybe spend more money on these minifigures and maybe do something less in the set later on down the line. We'll see what happens, but we did bite a lot into the budget of this project with just these minifigures. But I'm happy I did. These minifigures are extremely expensive, and the ones that I got used are actually in really good condition. The Iron Man is obviously the Mark 46, and in terms of modification, I'm not doing anything. This guy is going to remain pure, but War Machine, we're definitely going to be changing out that ugly stud shooter for this blaster piece. But there is one modification I wish I could do to this, but just not having the figure, I can't do it, and it's put the Bricktober War Machine arms up on War Machine, but unfortunately I can't do that because I don't.
What is up, you guys? This is Mini Superheroes Today.
Oh, hey Mini Superheroes Today, nice to have you on.
Hey everybody, Jonathan here, aka Mini Superheroes Today. I'm really excited to be on the channel, so thanks to Tommy for having me.
Can you do me a favor and just show off your version of the War Machine figure? I want to show the audience the Bricktober arms on this amazing figure.
War Machine is a tank in the movie, so he should be a tank as a minifigure as well. The base of War Machine here is, of course, the Civil War version, being the helmet, torso, and legs and all that, but the arms come from the Bricktober War Machine, and I used what's called the handcuff trick, where you take a pair of Lego handcuffs, use scissors to cut the chain out in between, and then put the handcuffs back on the figure to give them some bulk around the wrists and some gauntlets, so that's pretty cool. Then, of course, he's got a little backpack cannon here, and he does have his little baton back there, because, you know, he does use it against Cap's shield for like half a second in Civil War, so we should throw it in there just to be sure.
Moving on to Bucky, I really couldn't see much to do with this figure, but the obvious choice was to put the face print from the new figure that we got in the CMF on our original figure, just because it's an update to the original fig, which I really do believe looks so much more like Sebastian Stan than the original fig. So it's a really easy swap out for this one, making it look 100% more accurate and giving it a bit more fierceness, which I really appreciate from this face print. But Jonathan, what did you do with your figure?
I've always loved the way that this Bucky custom looks. The head is the confused face from Poe Dameron from the LEGO Star Wars sequel sets. I think that really looks a lot like Sebastian Stan, and it matches with the hair really well. Of course, the torso is the regular Civil War Bucky Winter Soldier torso, and the legs are from the collectible minifigure series Spy figure.
I really like those leg prints, so I might have to see if I can snag one of those spy figures before this series is over, just so I can make my figure a slight bit more detailed. Now, as for Scarlet Witch, she is one of my favorite characters out of this set, and honestly, it must be other people's favorite figure out of this set as well, considering she goes upwards of £20 or $25. I once again got this one used, but it's in a very good condition, and if I'm honest, this figure is pretty much perfect. The only thing that I really wish it had was maybe some arm printing, but I know Mini Superheroes Today has already added arm printing using the Rocket figure. Again, a figure I just don't have in my collection. But one thing I have done that is slightly different is I've added the fiery effects from the Endgame Scarlet Witch. I think these pieces look so much nicer as a magic effect than just two random pink dishes. I get what they were going for, but going forward, I'm going to have these fiery pieces in the pink color, as I believe these to make a lot more sense and they look so much more accurate. Now, there are two more figures left in this set. I want to talk about Captain America later because I feel like he's the one I've done the most to, but as for Sharon Carter, I'm not including her in this MOC. Unfortunately, the character just isn't in the scene that I'm trying to portray, so unfortunately, I thought it best to leave her out of it to save a bit of money. But you never know, we might be able to get her later on down the line, as the wonderful members who help out this channel really do help determine where I put the money into these projects, and considering they're giving that little bit extra, I give that little bit extra to you guys as well with exclusive content that can be found in the link below on my Discord. So if you're a member and you haven't joined my public Discord yet, go ahead and join, and we can give you the roles to unlock exclusive content. You also get to hang out with me every Friday on a Discord call at 5 PM UK time, along with many more benefits such as emojis and helping with ideas that I have for videos. But that's the amount of figures that are in the original set that we've kind of revamped into a new light. But obviously, there are a lot more superheroes in this scene, and I can't just leave it at that, so I've got to look into my wallet again to see if I can try and find a few more figures, otherwise we're going to have a pretty empty airport fight. And what better figure to start with than the one introduced in this film, Spider-Man. Now thankfully, I already have a Civil War Spider-Man. I got it in a Homecoming set a fair bit ago, and I thought why not update it to make it look a bit more accurate to the figures we get today by using this guy. This is the Zombie Slayer Spider-Man from the CMF series, just without the cape. Now, if you wanted to use the original Civil War suit, I would recommend taking the head off of the Zombie Slayer Spider-Man and putting it on the body of the Civil War suit. This just gives that Spider-Man the updated eyepieces that you see on a lot of other figures in the series today. Figures like the black and gold suit and the integrated suit from the new No Way Home sets. But if I'm honest, I'm just going to use this suit anyway, as I personally believe that the Civil War suit is too dark. I understand that in this film it is on the darker side, but I also believe that it should be done in the normal LEGO blue instead of LEGO's dark blue. Therefore, I'm just going to use the original Zombie Slayer Spider-Man, as it does kinda resemble that Civil War suit. Yeah, it has a few differences here and there, but overall it feels more Civil War-like to me than maybe this suit. And if I'm honest, if you do it this way and you use just this suit, you can get this figure super cheap at the moment, just being £3. Moving on to another character, again vital to the scene, Black Widow. Now in recent years we've got a lot more accurate Black Widows with this nice arm printing and face print that resembles, if you ask me, a lot more like Scarlett Johansson. Unfortunately, the original figure, to me at least, has way too short of hair, and frankly that face print to me at least looks terrifying. So I think the best thing to do in this situation would be combine the two figures, use this head, hairpiece and arm printing, and give that old figure the boost that it truly deserves. And this is it all complete, and damn, I feel like this is a much better version of Black Widow than we ever got in the set, and if I'm honest, it's better now than it was the original figure. This suit that she wore throughout Civil War is actually one of my favourite Black Widow suits. So finally having a really accurate minifigure of this Scarlett Johansson Black Widow is a nice addition to my collection. But I'm curious to see where Many Superheroes Today took his figure and give you guys another perspective, as I know some people still like that shorter hair look.
For Black Widow, I used the hair from the character Brick from the LEGO Incredibles 2 sets. I love that dark red hair color, and of course the style works pretty well for how Scarlett Johansson's hair looked in this movie. The torso, legs, and batons all come from the Black Widow from Civil War, not too much change there. The arms are from the more recent version, like the 2020 Black Widow and all that. Gotta love that arm printing and the Widow stingers on there. And then the head is the Jyn Erso head, but it's been used on Black Widow a good bit, so I thought it'd be a good fit here as well.
Now another addition I really wanted to make was Vision. He truly doesn't care in this scene, he just goes all out, to the point where he even almost kills War Machine. He's truly one of my favourite and most interesting characters in the MCU, and I'm actually ashamed that I don't have a figure of him, apart from the White Vision that we got from the CMF. Again, like most of the other ones here, this is on the more expensive side, coming in at about $22, and once again, there's not really a lot you can do to this figure to make it more accurate. LEGO obviously gave their minifig for the CMF arm printing and side leg printing, but unfortunately back in 2016 they didn't do that with a lot of their Marvel figures. Unless you were Spider-Man, I'd love to see an updated version of this figure in the green and red, with that same printing from the CMF, but unfortunately there's not really much you can do to this figure to make it more accurate. So with that said, we're just going to move on to Black Panther. Another new addition to the set. I honestly thought I could get away with using the new Black Panther that came out in 2021 with that nice purple look to him. And even though I have two of those Black Panther purple figures, I thought it right to once again go on Bricklink and buy the official figure that came out back in 2016. And to be honest, I'm really glad I did. I honestly think this is the best Black Panther figure that we've ever got from LEGO, and yes, I am including that 2022 set, as I have yet to see another Black Panther with printing on the crown itself. So I'm glad I bought this figure, and this one was on the cheaper side, only $10. For the modifications I made to it, I added these really cool legs that I found in my collection with a nice silver trim that actually looks like it molds into the torso, which is very nice. And ironically, I think it's the same legs that Many Superheroes Today used, except he used these really nice arm prints from apparently the same minifigure, so I've got to look through my collection to see if I can find that torso in there, to see if I can do this arm printing on there myself. But who are we going to have Black Panther fighting, you might ask? And that's none other than Hawkeye. Again, one of those figures that hasn't really had the same love from LEGO since these sets. To be honest, I truly do think that Hawkeye is one of the hardest figures to make, and although mine is unmodded, and is actually the worst condition figure that I bought out of this entire lot, I still think this version of Hawkeye is definitely the best one that we've had from LEGO. However, if you were considering doing some upgrades to it, check out what Many Superheroes Today has done.
Hawkeye had some of the best scenes in the Civil War airport battle, and of course, he looked great in his Civil War outfit. So to build him, I used the head from the German football CMF series. It's pretty rare here in America, but I don't know what it's like to get over in Europe. Anyways, that character or player's name is Goetze, I believe that's how it's pronounced, but then I used the torso, quiver, bow, and hair from the old Civil War Hawkeye figure. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The legs come from Black Widow from her most recent iterations. I think they've been used on some other figures though. The arm comes from Ethan Hunt. That gives him the short sleeve there. That came from LEGO Dimensions. And this arm is Huntress's arm from the LEGO DC collectible minifigure series. So a lot of parts on this one, but I do think it turned out pretty good.
And that just goes to show that you can make some upgrades on these figures even when I'm not making them. Obviously, LEGO is so diverse that you can pretty much do whatever you want with it and make what you believe looks the best. I'm just showing you my take on everything, however I do think that's the reason that these videos are the most popular. But moving on to our last few figs here, this is Falcon. Now, me and Mini Superheroes today did very different takes on this character. My one uses the regular torso and the wings from that Civil War set that he was in. I've replaced his arms with some brown arms to match his face print, and I've used the hair from T'Challa Star-Lord's CMF figure, as I believe it's just a way better headpiece than that original. As for the legs, I got them from the Han Solo Speeder set, as I feel like this kinda looks like the camo that he was wearing, and if you can ignore the snow on the shoes, I think it's a really nice set of legs to use on this figure. Plus I gave him 2 little guns, cause he always has 2 little guns. But Mini Superheroes today did a completely different take on this character, which is really awesome to see that you can do many different things to make your minifigures look accurate for you.
Building Falcon from Civil War is always a good time. The wings I used are from, of course, the Falcon from Civil War. It's actually my favorite set of Falcon wings to date. The torso and head are actually from the Infinity War Falcon though. I like the darker gray torso, and I love that you can spin the hair around and get a face for Sam that doesn't have the goggles on it. So having the diversity of options there is definitely appealing to me. Now, I've seen some people that agree with me that this is a good idea, others don't agree, so I'll be curious to hear what everybody thinks. But for the arms, I used the arms from Barbara Gordon from the LEGO Batman movie. I know that the skin tones don't quite match, but I think that it's a great way with existing pieces to get a short-sleeved look for Falcon, which I like better than the sleeveless look or than giving him like gray sleeves. I think it's a good meet in the middle, and again, even though the skin tone doesn't quite match, I just think it looks good enough that it works for my purposes. And the legs I used are from the LEGO collectible minifigure series Spy figure.
And now Captain America, one of my favorite figures out of this whole video. The reason I didn't talk about Captain America at the beginning is because I didn't actually buy that version of the Captain America. That one with the head/helmet is actually way more expensive than the one without the helmet, so I just bought the one without the helmet because I knew I was going to be doing a different alternative to the helmet. The first modification here is actually a pretty obvious one. We're going to take the Captain Carter minifigure that came out in the Marvel CMF and take her arms and legs and put them on this figure. I've been waiting for them to do a Captain America with some decent arm and leg printing for this exact purpose. And as for the head and the helmet, I actually am going to use this really nice figure from Phoenix Customs. Now, I know I said in my last multi-part series that I wasn't going to use custom parts, but this is the only time I'm making an exception. Phoenix Customs use pad printing on their figures to make them as high quality as something like LEGO. There's a reason people buy these figures for umpteen amounts of money. So I'm going to use this face print, and then I'm going to top it off with using their custom helmet that again is pad printed, just to get that chin strap, which I feel like this piece isn't too far away from what LEGO could be doing anyway. So just to get that look that I really want, I'm going to be using this. But don't worry, if you don't want this look and you want to go full LEGO purist, you can do this look, which is the one that Mini Superheroes today did. He used the exact same technique with the Captain Carter arms and legs, gave him a new shield piece that he can stick on his back, and stuck with the original LEGO helmet. Like I say, you can do multiple different things when trying to make your minifigures super accurate. This is the reason I love these episodes, because these minifig episodes really do show me that you can do anything you want really when it comes to minifigures to make them look more accurate. There are a lot of options, and like I say, this wasn't cheap. So I really want to emphasize again, check out my website and consider becoming a member. The total cost for all of these minifigures added up to an insane amount. A lot more into the budget of this series than I thought. But don't worry, I'm sure we'll figure something out. And that's all the minifigures that I'm going to be including in this video, but don't worry, there might be a few hidden surprises in the next upcoming videos in terms of civilians and extra minifigures that we could put into this model. Again, I'd love to know your ideas and what you think we could do in the comment section below. Like I say, we didn't talk about Ant-Man this video, but there's an entire part dedicated to just talking about him, so we will do that in a later video. Now, if we take a look at the scene, you can see that most of this is going to happen on the airstrip. So what do we need in terms of an airstrip? Now the first obvious one is the plane. I know I explained in the plan that I want a plane in this video so Ant-Man can hold the wing. So I thought to myself, I'm gonna have to build a plane, and that's the first thing I immediately attempted was building one, but then immediately realized that this was gonna be way bigger and way more expensive than I thought it was going to be. Thankfully, LEGO actually had my back on this one because they make a LEGO City plane. So I got in the car and I nipped down to my local toy store to pick one of these planes up. I managed to find my plane on a very good deal, and also noticed that in this plane is a car and an airport, which we can use for extra pieces. And I'm fully aware that this might not be the correct size or even the right plane, but I 100% think that this plane will work for the scenario that we're going to use, and it means that if you guys want to attempt something like this, you just have to go out and buy this plane. And you don't have to go on Rebrickable and find some giant MOC or UCS version or buy that old UCS plane that came out a while ago. Even though this is a playset plane, it's definitely going to work with what we need. This plane was definitely good enough to suit our needs. Now the things we don't need from this set is that little car and the terminal, because we're just going to build our own ones. So we can even recuperate some of the cost from that and put that into some other models. But what we will need is the actual plane itself, and this plane looks well detailed enough and even matches some of the color scheme from the film, which is 100% a bonus. And even though this plane is very well detailed, I unfortunately stumbled across a problem with it, and that was these wings. It would work fine if you were just making an airport because the wing doesn't have to come off the plane, but because this wing has to come off, I have to remove this gigantic piece from the center of the plane. Unfortunately, this means that we're going to have to create our own custom wings, and I've done that in here. This video is going to contain quite a few studio files of more about what I have planned to build rather than actual physical models, but that's mainly because I want to get your opinions on these models before I go ahead and buy them, so let me know what you think of these in the comment section below. These wings are roughly the same size as the previous wings, except they're done on 2 different plates, and hopefully they'll stay up. If I'm honest, these wings are kind of just thrown together, but I made them to be the same shape. And obviously the right wing is not going to be attached at all, it's just going to leave this jagged edge mark, because the other side of the wing is going to be in Giant Man's hands. I also made the back section of this plane bigger because having the front section be bigger as well might make the plane look overall just slightly disproportionate, and it was the wrong color. Now moving on, as you can see in the original set, there was no flooring or anything, it was just a big building, Giant Man, and a few cars. So obviously doing the same sort of approach, we've just made it a bit bigger and we've done a lot more cars. This is one of my favorite vehicles out of the whole lot. It's an aircraft tug designed by Heinz 551. As far as I'm aware, his instructions are completely free over on Rebrickable, and although I have modified it to make it slightly cheaper and use less parts, I've tried to make it look a little bit more like the Civil War version by tiling off a few areas and adding this lamp on the top. But if I'm honest, I didn't really do much, it's a really nice build. One thing that was prevalent on the set that's definitely going to be recreated here is the amount of boxes that were just randomly spewed out across the airport. Giant Man kicks a load of these boxes and it's probably just for dramatic effect, but I thought it best to recreate some of these larger boxes considering Giant Man's going to be so big in this MOC. And this is simply just made of some dark tan bricks. This idea was actually given to me by a member, and they really do contribute to quite a bit that happens on these MOCs. One thing I am really excited to build, however, is the airport walkway thing. I don't know the actual terminology for it, but basically this thing. It was always my intention to recreate this scene, as I believe this to be one of the coolest scenes from that fight. As like I've said many a time, Spider-Man is my favorite superhero, and when they introduced him in Civil War, they really did make him the sarcastic character when he's wearing the mask, more so than he does even in his newer films. I was actually tempted to make this as an independent MOC, but I thought including it in this series would be even cooler. And I'm really surprised LEGO didn't actually make this into the set themselves, considering LEGO's version decided to go with an oil tanker that can explode. Maybe this was just too ambitious for LEGO to do, or maybe they wanted to do a set with a vehicle because kids would be more drawn to that kind of a thing. But that set did originally contain Spider-Man and Captain America, along with Vision and Hawkeye, so LEGO did have the figure selection to do it. You could have almost done 2 mini sets in one, which is kind of what we're doing in terms of this model. Another idea I've seen by a bunch of people in the comment section, which I really do agree with, is we can hide Peter Parker's phone behind one of these cars or behind one of these boxes to make it look like he was filming for his side project, which we see at the beginning of Homecoming, which I think would be a really cool reference, and one that I didn't think of. That's why I love reading all of the comments that I get on these videos. And as you can see, I'm recreating that scene where Peter Parker is holding up the walkway, and yes, it is built at a specific height, so a minifigure can fit underneath it relatively comfortably. and that's why this walkway is a bit weirdly shaped and not necessarily movie accurate, as recreating this scene is slightly difficult when a minifigure has to get underneath it to hold it up. And hopefully these wheels on each side should help out the minifig quite a bit. And lastly, we just have some luggage carts. Now these luggage carts can be seen all throughout this fight, and there's actually a lot more than just 2 of them. Now I have made 2 of them, and they're a very simple build, consisting of a few panel pieces that are coloured in blue with plates on the top and bottom with just wheels on the bottom. Now usually these luggage cars are being pulled by a vehicle, and you can see one vehicle in one shot, but to keep costs low I just decided to shove on another one of these luggage cars on the back here instead of making the vehicle, because that would increase the piece count and the unique parts that I'd need to buy on Bricklink, therefore making it more expensive. So 2 luggage cars is what we're going to stick at for now, and like I say, I would have loved to include more vehicles and try and fill this MOC out a little bit, but I think this is a good starting point at least. There were definitely plans to create a lot more vehicles, including this helicopter and some more of these luggage car things, but if I'm honest, those minifigures from the previous episode did eat into the budget quite a fair bit, considering I had basically 0 of these minifigures and I had to buy them all. This series so far at least has had a very positive engagement, and even though I couldn't modify most of those minifigures, the response on that video has been insane. Like I said before, most of these models are digital for now, but hopefully you should see these models in live action on episode 5. Next week we have Giant Man to look forward to, the true central core to what I believe is going to be this MOC's saving grace. This is definitely what I'd call the quote-unquote main build of this airport series, so I look forward for you guys to joining me on that episode. Do I even have to say anything anymore? Okay, so for those of you who only watch this series and have wondered where the hell it's been for the past 2 weeks, yeah, let's just say the postal service is not very fast right now. So ordering things with next day shipping can still sometimes go into 3 to 4 and maybe even 5 days. I did put out a post last week saying that this episode was going to be delayed, as I just didn't have the pieces to complete Giant Man, and I wasn't going to show something that was half built because I wanted to get your guys' opinions on truly how this would look. So without further ado, let's jump into building the ultimate Civil War airport battle, a 6-part series where we go through and try and make the airport battle from 2016 more of a master builder's set. And even though, like I say, this part has been delayed, this is part 4 where we take a look at Giant Man. And taking a look at his minifig, you can see that it's a very nicely detailed figure. And even though yes, there is a way better helmet that I could put on this figure to make it even more detailed, it's just not one that I wanted to include in this, considering that the original set has a brick-built version. So from the get-go, I always wanted to build some form of gigantic minifigure. And even though online, yes, there are a few other versions of Giant Man, before I show him off, I want to just explain why I went with this direction of Giant Man, because there are many different directions you can go down when building quote-unquote a giant minifig. Now, LEGO minifigures in my mind are iconic. I love them to pieces. And I know they're horribly disproportionate in comparison to something like a human being incredibly wide, but I still think these are the most iconic pieces of LEGO. Meaning, if we take a normal minifigure and we make him giant, it's not all of a sudden going to make normal human proportions, something like Hachiroku 24 has done. I've probably butchered that name, I'm sorry. But they made this Giant Man, and although it's very nice and I very much like this design, like I say, if a minifigure was to get bigger, I don't think it would all of a sudden grow human proportions. I much prefer his second attempt on this, which makes it look more like the minifig proportions, which I believe uses the same sort of instructions as the buildable Harry Potter figures that we got in June of this year. These are 2 really good designs, but I really wanted mine to be bigger. So when doing research and development for this figure, I scoured Rebrickable and Google Images to just try and find something that would be a good base to work off of when building my Giant Man. And unfortunately, there wasn't a lot. Yeah, I could do most of the building myself, but some of the minifigures' angles, especially those torso ones, are hard to get on a larger sized figure. And I really wanted the positions of the arms and legs to be held in place so I could pose the figure like I could any other minifigure. And taking a look at a lot of different designs, I finally came up with something I'm happy with. And yes, before you ask, instructions are currently being worked on, so you guys can build this exact Giant Man that I've created. However, I do want to give a quick shout out to State Alchemist over on Rebrickable, because I took a lot of inspiration from his Galactus design. So if you guys were thinking about making a Galactus or just a giant minifig, I recommend buying his instructions, as they'll be cheaper than mine. But if you do want to build this Giant Man exactly like I've built mine, instructions will be available on TommyCBricks.com. As you can see, this is a normal sized minifig. And like I said in the beginning half of the video, I like to make a minifig's proportions the same whether they get bigger or smaller. LEGO do tend to take this concept into stuff like their nano figs and their bigger figs, as you can see by these examples, but the bigger version of Ant-Man from that original set just doesn't have the same feel that I would like out of a giant Lego figure. The back of this figure is horrible, only consisting of big open studs, meaning you can really only look at this figure from the front. And even then, I feel like this figure is really stuck in the past by just making all of its detail mainly stickers. Even Gwarp from the Harry Potter series did, in my mind, a better job, even though it uses the same figure as a base. But without further ado, here is my update to that Giant Man figure from the Civil War set. I hope you guys enjoy it. As you can see, I've gone for a very similar look to State Alchemist, being just a little bit shorter because of that helmet, and if I'm honest, building this was a massive challenge. This model consists of 1,300 pieces, and obviously when building a custom Lego set, you don't have numbered bags, so needing to null everything out would have probably been the better decision. However, I'm really impatient, so I wanted to get building right away. Constructing Giant Man was a task in itself. His hands and legs are almost 3 times as big as a minifig, and here is what the whole figure looks like in comparison to his minifig self. I think this captures the minifig proportions almost perfectly, and having things like these open studs in the back of the legs, something that the LEGO Harry Potter figures do not have, by the way, just sells that look to me that this minifigure has gotten bigger, a look which I really, really like. Another thing I just want to take a quick look at is the helmet. Now, the helmet went through 3 iterations, and if we take a look at the scene, you can see that these red pieces on the forehead aren't actually there in the Civil War airport fight. Now, in universe, this is just because this version of the Ant-Man suit was a predecessor to the Ant-Man 2 suit, therefore this looks slightly different, but the reason I put them there on this model was because every single version of the Ant-Man figure that we've had has had those red lines above the eyes. But don't worry, if you do want to take them off, if you guys were going to build this yourself, they are interchangeable with grey panels, so you can make this look exactly like the one from the airport fight scene if you wanted to. For me, however, I think I'm just going to leave them on. Now, this version of Ant-Man doesn't have the flip down mask like the other big fig did, but considering that never happens in the film, I'm pretty sure that that's okay, and there is no flesh tone head underneath this helmet. It is technically just all one big head, but the main thing I really like about this figure is the fact that he can actually hold his arms up and they can stay there, something I've heard the Harry Potter figures do struggle with. And I wish I could say the same thing about the figure's legs. However, just because of the sheer weight of the figure, you're not going to be doing any running poses with this figure anytime soon. I wish I had the parts for the wings constructed, just so I could show you guys him holding the wing, but I guess we'll have to wait till the full reveal to do that shot. If I'm honest, I'm super proud of the way that this guy turned out, and all of it works, and it's completely legal, at least as far as I'm aware, in terms of building technique. Like I say, if you want to build this yourself, you can check out my website. The instructions will be available after episode 6. Okay, second to last week, reveals next week. What have we got going on? Well, for starters, I want to start by saying thank you for all of the feedback on Giant Man in the previous part. This is exactly why I like making this series live, so I can get feedback on my models so I can change them for the next week if there's something you guys don't like about them. Speaking of which, there was a few things that were actually done purposefully that people were pointing out as problems, and I wanted to address a few of those, as well as look at some of the changes I made to Giant Man based on some of your guys' comments. Now, first things first is the helmet. Now, I noticed that a lot of people were concerned about how the helmet looked, from some people saying it was too small to some people saying that it was the wrong shape, and I thought I'd address a few of those things now. As for the shape, I actually really like the shape of this helmet. Yeah, it looks kinda boxy, but something I failed to mention in last week's episode is that I'm not trying to emulate the Ant-Man helmet. I'm trying to emulate LEGO's version of the Ant-Man helmet. Specifically this version of the Ant-Man helmet, and this is why the mouthpiece doesn't stick out as far as some people would like, as I'm trying to emulate a helmet mold and not necessarily the helmet that Ant-Man had depicted in the film. Yes, I have had some other complaints about the helmet, saying that the earpieces aren't long enough or the eyes are the wrong shape, but I've come to the conclusion that not everybody is going to like the same thing that I like. Specifically the eyes, I think they look really good, and it's really difficult to get this shape right on something like these eyes. But as for the ears and the mouthpiece, I completely agree that they were too small. So you can see here that I've added some extra extensions to the earpieces to try and make them a bit longer, as well as change the mouthpiece dish piece, which significantly improves the respirator in my opinion. all without compromising the look that this LEGO helmet would look if it was blown up giant. Another comment I saw was, why doesn't the body have more definition? And again, this was a purposeful decision to try and make it emulate the print of the minifig rather than actually giving my figure dimension. Something I think, again, is a very personal opinion, and you're either going to like it or you're going to not. But one thing I did agree with is somebody said that the belt was way too small, and I agreed, so I made the belt much larger. And although I did just say that I wanted to make it look like a print, so I didn't want to give it definition, I gave the belt a bit more definition. And like I say, guys, the instructions are being worked on for this model as we currently speak, and the changes I've made in this model here will be reflected in the instructions. I also saw one guy complaining that he's not called Giant Man, and the only reason I keep referring to him as Giant Man is because on the actual set he is referred to as Giant Man. Like, I get it, he's Ant-Man, but he's big. But that is his name in the version of the suit. But whether you like this Giant Man or you're not really a fan, I think there are so many people that are a fan of him to the point where I'm happy to call him a finished model. And now that we should move on to something new, because we talked about Giant Man loads last week, and what we're talking about today could be considered the biggest part of this build. And the reason I say it could be considered the largest and it's not the largest is because Giant Man is still way more pieces than this model. But taking a look at the original set, you can see that the original set had 3 main builds, being the Quinjet, which we've already replaced with a giant plane, Giant Man, which we've already replaced with a newer version of Giant Man. So all that's left is the representation of the airport, which in this case is an airport control tower. So I feel like we need one of them as well. But here's the catch. I didn't have a lot of money left in this budget, and I didn't want to go adding a giant building into it now, so I had to rely on my parts collection, meaning this model isn't as good as it could have been. Taking a look at the studio file here, you can see that I've used a lot of boxy angles, and unfortunately that's just the way that it's going to be, but thankfully the original set also was quite boxy, so I'm going to pretend like that was a purposeful decision. I purposefully designed this set to be quite boxy and square-shaped, as the original model seemed to do that as well. The main difference I wanted mine to be that was different from the original set was its height. As you can see from the film, that this tower is incredibly tall, and if I'm honest, is much grayer than the one in the original set. Maybe they had different concept art? I don't know. But I finally got something I was happy with and ordered the pieces, and I think this calls for a building time-lapse. Now yes, I still had to order some pieces that were very specific to this model, things like those black windows for the top of the roof, and fun fact, they were actually the most expensive piece on this build, and I had to buy 8 of them. But if I'm honest, I'm really happy how this model came out, especially considering the amount of limited pieces that I had to build this model, and I think it will make a great addition to this already growing MOC that I can't wait to put all together in one video next week. But as the rest of this time-lapse goes on, I just want to take a minute to thank all of the members that have made this video possible, and a lot of other videos. These MOCs obviously cost a lot of money, and with people like this contributing back to the channel means I can just make these videos bigger and better for you guys. So big thanks to Brother from Another Brick, Brightest Witch Bricks, Flopfish3, Taylor Fitch, Spite is the Best, Revenge, Topic Bricks, Dustin Martin, Ben Willett, Pixel Craftian, and all of the other people that are going past on the screen right now. All of you guys have honestly changed this series and have changed all of the content going forward. If you guys want to become a member like these awesome people, press that join button next to the subscribe button, which I assume has already been pressed if you're this far into the video. But without further ado, here's the tower, and it looks awesome. And one thing I'm super happy about this tower is it's actually taller than Giant Man, with just over half the piece count. And I think it's very reminiscent of the original tower. Even has this weird sticky outside bit that the LEGO model has, as well as the film. Seriously, if you know what this sticky out the side bit is, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. I've added a lot of things that make this building look aesthetically pleasing, but does it have an interior? No, these doors are completely for show and don't lead to anywhere but a very painful death. Is there any control to this control tower in the top of it? No. Does it also need it? I don't think so. None of this will be seen in the final MOC, and this tower is basically just to fill out the airport side of it. I'm much happier with the shaping of this model. As you can see, the original one was very boxy, and although yes, mine is boxy, mine has a lot more definition, using things like masonry bricks to really break up these big grey walls. And the tower is full surround, there is no facade. Again, I thought this was easier, as then I would not have to do any sort of interior, which definitely would have inflated the price quite a bit, and maybe something we could add if we ever revisit this MOC one day. I really like the way that the roof is nicely tiled, but the top of it has these big antenna pieces and different radar dishes to show that this could be a functional building, and I think this is going to look really good next to all the other models that we've got coming next week. I can now call this airport tower complete. It looks amazing, and I'm really happy to see it next to someone like Giant Man, and it just completely dwarf him considering how big he is. And like I say, this uses most of my common parts in my collection, so if you guys wanted to take on something like this yourself, I think it would be very easy to do so. You might just have to order things like these antennas and the windows, like I had to do. Overall, a fantastic model, and if I'm honest, I don't do this very often, but if you're at this point in the video, you're clearly interested in my content and should definitely subscribe. If the button's red down there, definitely give it a click. You're enjoying the content, it's free, you might as well. You can always unsubscribe at any moment in time, and I'm curious to see what kind of a spike we can get from this video if you got this far. So here we are, part 6, the grand finale. God, this has been another project which has just gone so swimmingly. Yeah, we've had a few hiccups in terms of postal service over the last couple of weeks, but I couldn't have asked for this series to go down any better than it already has. Not only has it brought a bunch of new people to the channel, but they're all engaging on these episodes, and shows me as a creator I can do a mock from an older film and it still get the views that I want it to get and justifies such an intense project like this. So I'm gonna say it one last time because this is the last time I'm gonna say it. Welcome to the last part of building the ultimate Civil War airport battle, a 6-part series where we go through and try and make that original set from 2016 more of a UCS or Master Builders standard. If this is the first episode you're seeing, I highly suggest going back because there's 5 other episodes where we go in depth into every step of the process from the plan all the way to building time lapses. In this week, we're adding about $100 worth of parts that you would have seen the mocks for in part 3. I'll go through them one by one and then we will do a review of the full set. And then I'll give you some hints to what's coming in the future. So jumping right in, you can see from part 3 that we had a bunch of new things to add, and I want to start by talking about these wings on the plane. The original wings for the plane were just this giant piece that I couldn't use as I wanted Giant Man to be able to rip one of these wings off and have him posed with the wing in his hands, similar to how we saw in that one scene where he ripped the wing off the plane. This meant I had to deconstruct the plane from its original build and then change a few things up to try and brick build one of these wings, and then obviously copy and flip that to the other side, but leave a breakaway so we can easily break the wing off so Giant Man can hold it in the final build, which I'll show you guys a bit later. Moving on, I really wanted to have Wanda throwing some cars, so I decided to just buy some LEGO City sets last minute. I believe these two to be police cars from the LEGO City line, just modified slightly to look less policey, and I wanted to put them up on stands just to show that Wanda was throwing them at Iron Man and they were levitating off the ground. As for some of the details I wanted on the ground for the airport, I decided to make these boxes, and that's mainly because the original set had a similar sort of set of boxes, probably trying to replicate these ones from the same scene where Ant-Man kicks them, so I thought I'd build a large amount of boxes, just doing it in 2 different sizes to place randomly throughout the scene. As for the jetway, yes, I do read the comments. I really like the way that this one turned out. Yeah, it's a bit boxy, but the inside of it all is tiled off with these nice grill tile pieces, along with the top using 2x4 tiles, and these wheels at the bottom are incredibly detailed with an easy detachable point so minifigures can hold up the structure, meaning we can replicate the scene where Spider-Man and Captain America are having a fight. It falls on Spider-Man and Spider-Man holds it up just using his bare strength. We can replicate this with a minifig now. And hold the phone, sorry for interrupting, I just wanted to let everybody know that I have a P.O. box that I haven't announced on the channel yet really, but it's been in the descriptions. I guess you can count this as the announcement. But to the one person who sent me something, I opened it and it ended up being a battle droid with no name or no letter in there that just reads, "You just got clankered." Thank you for being the first person to send me something to my P.O. box without me necessarily announcing it, so I was very confused why something turned up. But if you guys did want to send me anything, even if it's just a letter, a drawing, anything, I do want to do some form of mail time episode where I open things that people have sent me, because I feel like it would be a fun, entertaining video. If you want to do that, the P.O. box is linked in the description below. Anyway, back to the episode. But as I thought the airstrip would be a bit plain without a few more vehicles, I decided to add these luggage cars, and these, all made up from the studio file, look very nice in hand. And although yes, I did get a few used pieces from the bricklinker I bought them from, I still think the color aspects worked really well, and I can't wait to see how this and the other vehicle I have planned complements the airstrip and just the busyness of the overall scene. Speaking of which, this is that vehicle. Now, I love this build. It's so unbelievably good, and you can see exactly where I got the instructions to build this from part 3, so you should definitely go back and watch it if you're interested in building some of these models yourself. But this model here was extremely fun to build. Yeah, I modified it from its original instructions a little bit, just to make it a little bit more affordable, and I must say minifigures on the top of it don't look half bad either. Now before we get into the final model, I just want to say I really enjoyed this whole process of start to finish, and the members behind the scenes video will be out in early January so you guys can see that. It's just not ready yet, but I do want to explain a little bit how this is going to work going forward into 2022 with future projects. Now don't worry, no spoilers, but with the release of No Way Home, there are a lot of MOC projects that I want to take on, and I really need to be careful which kind of ones I'm prioritizing in terms of a large scale MOC like this one, considering there are a bunch of new releases as well, which I also want to cover. We've now done what I would classify as 2 large-scale MOCs and 1 small-scale MOC, being the Daily Bugle MOC and now this Civil War MOC in the large category and the Vulture Wing set in the small category. And although in my head I already have the next large-scale MOC planned, and I've already began starting to work on things in the background, believe me when I say that it will be bigger and more expensive than both the Daily Bugle and this series, but I don't want to give away fully what it is just yet, as there's still a lot of things to still finalize and make sure that it's even possible to do. But if that's not vague enough to subscribe, I don't know what is. While this project is still getting sorted out, I plan to do a lot of these smaller scale MOCs that I plan to release instructions alongside of, so you guys will be able to build some of the MOCs that I do myself. But these episodes will be nice one-off little episodes that you guys can watch and then potentially build yourself if you guys were interested in doing that yourself. But as for the next large-scale multi-part project, I'm going to hold off on announcing anything at the moment. Rest assured that there's something in the works right now, but until next year, I'm not going to know whether this project is possible or not. So hang tight, I'll make a video when I have more information on it. But as for the first mini-part episode, to still keep up some engagement on what you guys would like to see first, go and vote on my community tab. I've already started planning out all of them. I just want to know which one you guys would like to see first. But that's all for now on future plans. Now, in the Daily Bugle multi-part series that we did, I saw a lot of feedback in terms of the last episode, and the finale just being a montage of the full set. I had a lot of comments saying that I should have gone more in depth into the set, so that's exactly what I plan to do with this episode, with a cinematic episode coming tomorrow for you guys to watch a cinematic of the full set. So without further ado, here's the reveal. And as you can see, this is a gigantic set. This ended up being way bigger than I thought it was going to be, and not just in terms of height, in terms of width as well. I genuinely thought that this wasn't going to be that big of a set, and thought it was going to be pretty lackluster on the last episode. But I'm happy to say that this set ended up being huge, and truly do feel like this deserves the status of Master Builders. As if LEGO did make a set like this, I genuinely seeing this being a fan favourite amongst Marvel fans. In relation to the original plan, it was actually stuck to pretty damn well. You can see from the plans that the airport tower did end up getting slightly taller, as the original plan was to have Giant Man be the biggest thing in the MOC, but I think as the set expanded outwards, it also expanded upwards. And the one thing I really like about this whole model is the fact that it's so diverse and interchangeable, as we didn't put it on any form of base plate, something I truly feel like a Master Builders set should be able to do, and do it well, which I feel this does. Obviously I've put this on a grey table to kind of sell the effect of a runway, but I could see this set being displayed very well on a shelf, with the only thing maybe giving you a bit of trouble was that plane. But the good thing is because one of the wings is cut off, you can display it with its no wing side against the wall, as surprisingly the plane is actually very well balanced and doesn't fall over. But I still think my favourite part about this entire process and the MOC have to be the minifigures. The minifigures are just so awesome, and they look really good in this final scene. I even added a triangle piece on the end of a pole attached to Falcon's foot to try and sell the illusion that that was Red Wing, as his CMF just used the same piece with a bit of printing on it. The rest of the minifigures look great in this scene, and I think I'm going to classify Giant Man as a minifig build, but he's still technically a minifig as he's shaped like one, so he's still considered my favourite part of this build. And that reminds me, the Giant Man instructions are now 100% complete, and they're available over on TommyCBricks.com, so if you did want to go and take on the challenge of building this Giant Man for yourself, and believe me when I say he is a challenge, you can 100% go over to my website and purchase those instructions now. And as for the rest of the build, everything's just sat there to complement it, so things like these boxes, the cones, are just all there to sell the effect of this being an airport, and I believe that this is finally project complete. But whoa, wait a minute. I don't actually think this could be the last time we see the airport scene on the TommyCBricks channel, as I've started a new mini MOC series very similar to these multi-parts but in one video. I've already done one episode on it where we tackle the final vulture scene, and I believe we could do a very similar one for the scene where Spidey jumps on that luggage car van and that helicopter when they first interact with Captain America. So maybe this isn't the last time we'll see the airport, and if you want to see what a little taste of that could be, click the screen now. I'll see you in the next one. Remember the cinematics tomorrow, and thanks for joining me on this amazing series.